Okay, I think we're going to get started. Can those of you in the back hear me okay? Can you hear me okay back there? Okay. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. I think we are rolling. Recording. Recording. Okay, I'm going to jump in. Thanks everyone for coming inside on this beautiful evening. Tough to be inside, but we get to talk about beautiful Vermont state lands. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to be here. My name is Hannah Phillips. I'm the State Lands Administration Program Manager for the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources in the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. We're here tonight to talk about the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources Land Management Planning Rule. Before I jump into this, I just want to do a couple of housekeeping items. Bathrooms, if you need them, I think the easiest way is down those stairs over there. We do have some cold ice water in the back. It is warm in here tonight, so please help yourself. If you need an elevator, there is one right outside the door to take you down to the bathrooms, or if you'd rather, you can head right back into the lobby that you first came through. You wouldn't need to contend with the elevator, be on the same level. The Wi-Fi password, should you want it, is available up here. The Wi-Fi network is Epic Employee, password single track with a capital S and a letter 1. You will see throughout that I have provided access to the materials digitally as well, although we certainly have enough copies. So if you didn't grab a copy of the rule on your way in, you can head back over to the registration table and Gunnar or Chris can get you set up with that. We are recording tonight. We'll record the whole meeting, both the presentation, the questions, and the public comments. So I just want to make everyone aware of that. The recording has already been started. I think with that, unless there are any other questions just about where to find things that you need, I'll jump right into it. So I'm just going to start with an overview of our agenda for the night. First, I'll give an overview of ANR land ownership. You'll hear me say ANR a lot throughout. It's faster than saying Agency of Natural Resources. That's what I'm referring to when I say ANR. I'll then provide an overview of the rulemaking process. Then we'll jump into the draft rule itself. I'll walk everyone through that. We'll finish up by talking about how to provide public comment. You are certainly welcome to provide comment tonight, and there is time for that on the agenda, but it is not the only way to provide public comment. And then we'll finish up with public comments from those people who have signed up. So when you came in, we asked you to register, and then if you would like to provide a public comment, there's a list to add your name to say, I want to say something tonight. We also captured the names of people who signed up ahead of time online. So if you didn't already do that, it's not too late. You can just head back over there. So opening with the overview of ANR land ownership. The Agency of Natural Resources has 3 departments: the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Department of Environmental Conservation nested within the agency. These are the mission statements, both of our agency and our departments, which I will walk you through as listed on our website. And our distinct land ownerships, which I will talk about, are managed to advance the mission of each landowning department and the agency as a whole for a wide range of public, resource, and environmental interests. So the Agency of Natural Resources is charged with the oversight and management of Vermont's natural environment on behalf of the people of Vermont. The Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation, which owns and manages state forests and state parks, is to practice and encourage high-quality stewardship of Vermont's environment by monitoring and maintaining the health, integrity, and diversity of important species, natural communities, and ecological processes, managing forests for sustainable use, including providing and promoting opportunities for compatible outdoor recreation, and providing related information, education, and service. The Department of Fish and Wildlife, which owns, among other types of lands, and I will touch on those in a moment, wildlife management areas. Their mission is the conservation of fish, wildlife, and plants and their habitats for the people of Vermont. And within the Department of Environmental Conservation, the mission is to preserve, enhance, restore, and conserve Vermont's natural resources and protect human health for the benefit of this and future generations. The Agency of Natural Resources owns approximately 375,000 acres in fee, which means in its entirety, without rights being held by a different entity. 185,000 acres of those approximately are state forest, 135,000 acres approximately are wildlife management areas owned by the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and 54,000 acres approximately are state parks owned and managed by the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. If you're doing the math, that doesn't add up to 375,000 acres. There are other types of ownerships, and so just to briefly touch on a few of those, we also own lands associated with dams. Those are primarily owned and managed by the Department of Environmental Conservation. Fish and Wildlife also owns and manages what we call stream bank management areas, which are riparian lands. Fish and Wildlife owns and manages access areas, which provide public access to waters of the state of Vermont. And then Fish and Wildlife also owns and manages 2 conservation camps. How are ANR lands managed? Our lands are, we've divided them up into 5 districts, which are the regional offices are located in Springfield, Rutland, Essex, Barre, and St. Johnsbury. State lands are managed by 10 to 12 natural resource experts who sit on what we call our district stewardship teams, which represent the 3 departments. And they bring the expertise of those departments through their roles. I'm not going to capture all of them, but just to mention a few of them, those teams are staffed with individuals such as wildlife biologists, ecologists, foresters, recreation specialists, watershed basin planners, fisheries biologists, among others. And their responsibilities are to develop management plans, manage the agency-owned land in the district in which they're situated, to consider and respond to proposals for use of state lands, and to evaluate any proposed new land acquisitions by the state of Vermont. State agency lands are also managed by what we call the ANR Land Stewardship Team, which is primarily staffed by directors and program managers. And their responsibilities are to approve plans and policies related to state land management, generally, which have been developed by the district stewardship teams. So why do we develop management plans for state-owned lands? The reasons are many, but to capture a few of them, first, landscape scale. This gives us the opportunity to participate in landscape scale natural resource planning and management. So really thinking about how state lands are situated within the larger context of the lands that surround them. The second is to better understand public desires and opinion. It is a participatory planning process, as you'll see as we move through this presentation. The third is to balance multiple uses and to think about how we do that responsibly. The fourth is to provide transparency into our state land management, proposed state land management, and then ultimately captured in the plan that people can consult as they wish. And then lastly, to provide those opportunities that the public seeks and that advance the agency's and department's mission. So I'm going to provide an overview of rulemaking at this point. For those of you who are not familiar with the process, I'm going to keep this pretty high level, but I'll explain what is a rule and really how did we get here. So what is a rule? I've pulled this directly from the Vermont Administrative Procedures Act, 3 VSA Chapter 25. A rule means an agency statement of general applicability that implements, interprets, or prescribes law or policy, and that has been adopted in the manner provided by these sections of the Act. How are administrative rules adopted? What is the process? Drawing from the rule on rulemaking, there are essentially 4 formal filings that move this process forward. The first filing is a pre-filing with what is called the Interagency Committee on Administrative Rules, ICAR. indicating that this process is beginning. The second filing is a filing of the proposed rule with the Office of the Secretary of State. That second filing begins a public notice and public comment period. There's then a third filing, which is the final proposed rule with the Office of the Secretary of State and LCAR, the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, which signals the end of the notice and public comment period. And then the fourth filing is the adopted rule, which goes to the Office of the Secretary of State and the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules. So this is the formal rulemaking process. Where are we in this process? We haven't initiated this process yet. So we are in what is called pre-rulemaking public engagement. This is an optional public engagement undertaking, which we have elected to conduct to put this rule out there to hear from all of you. So this is a step of our choosing. We have a proposal that, as you can see, we've put a fair amount of time into, but we're really interested in hearing from all of you who have taken the time to come here and participate in this process before we initiate that formal process. So I just want to be clear that we're not yet in this formal process. So why are we developing a rule? The primary goal is to develop a single comprehensive land management planning process that it clearly outlines the process for the public and provides for public input. The second is to develop efficiencies in planning and implementation while maintaining the existing thorough resource review and analysis that's currently contained in our management planning process, and I'll touch on this more as we go through. And the third primary goal of this effort is to implement process improvement based on an agency evaluation of our planning process, which we conducted between 2020 and 2023. I'll elaborate on that last point a bit more in this slide. So I mentioned we started that process in 2020. Essentially, we initiated that process recognizing that currently only about 1/3 of agency lands have a current management plan. Why is that the case? Our process is extremely thorough, and with thorough also comes time consuming. So as I mentioned before, it's the responsibility of the district stewardship teams to develop those plans. They consist of 10 to 12 experts from across the agency, working with those 10 to 12 individuals who also have other job responsibilities, some of which are state lands related and some of which are not, is a time-consuming process. And so it's a process that takes time to get all of those people together and to move these plans forward. So we initiated this conversation with a goal to identify planning efficiencies without losing that comprehensive natural resource evaluation process and collaborative process that helps move our plans forward. We think that's one of the strongest aspects of our planning process, that it's so interdisciplinary in nature and staff from across the agency work together. And we think that by having those 10 to 12 individuals collaborating and discussing, we're really sort of setting up a best case scenario for state lands. And we don't want to lose that, but we acknowledge that we need more plans to provide more value for Vermonters. And so remembering that one of the goals is to achieve these multiple uses, it is the planning process that allows us to maximize those multiple uses. So that's what we're seeking, is efficiency without compromising the natural resource evaluations of the plans. So now we're going to jump into the draft rule, provide a little preamble, and then we'll get right into it. So the purpose of the rule, which is drawn right from the rule itself, is to establish a management planning framework and process, and to set forth the requirements for public input related to land management planning. So paraphrased in my words, what it does, it establishes a management planning framework, it establishes our public engagement principles, and it formalizes what we call the land management classifications. We will jump into those in a moment. Because as soon as we jump into the rule, it's really going to get very detailed, I wanted to start by just highlighting what I see as the major changes proposed in this rule, and I'll return to this at the end. So the major changes, which I'll call out as we go through this, are a proposed addition of what we're calling the statewide plan, which resulted from that process improvement conversation. You'll learn more about that as we go through. And the proposed addition of 2 new land management classifications. These resulted from, for those of you who have been following the Act 59 or 30 by 30 conservation process statewide, one of the charges or tasks of that initial inventory was to consider how state lands can be used to increase ecological reserve areas. And the recommendation of that work group was to establish these 2 new land management classifications. And so this rule proposes adding those to the land management classifications that we currently use. So these will all make more sense in context as we move through this. And then again, acknowledging that this is 10 pages of text, I thought it might be helpful to just call out some questions for you to consider and areas that I think we'd really benefit from your input. Obviously, you're welcome to comment on anything you'd like in the rule, but these are 2 areas where I think drawing your attention would be especially helpful to us. So first, does the draft rule provide the public comment opportunities that you desire? If not, what would you change? And second, do the land management classifications match the desired conditions you'd like to see on Vermont state lands? And if not, what would you change or add? So now we are going to dive into the rule. There's no way around it. This is text heavy, and my slides are text heavy as well, so bear with me. I'm going to share highlights on this screen, but I am also going to be walking through my own version of the rule right here, and I would encourage you to do the same. If you did not pick up a hard copy, we have hard copies at the registration table, and you could go get one. So some sections I am, just in the interest of time, going to move pretty quickly through. I'm not going to read this verbatim. The purposes, the section 1 outlines the purposes. I'm not going to go through that section with the full group. Section 2 outlines applicability and specifically which lands this rule pertains to and does not. So Section 2A, this rule applies to management plans for the following lands owned in fee by the Agency of Natural Resources. And we have listed state forests, state parks, wildlife management areas, lands associated with dams, and stream bank management areas owned by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. This rule does not apply to agency-owned easements, access areas, conservation camps, and fish culture stations. And then an important caveat there in C, that nothing in this rule shall prevent the agency from taking management actions on agency lands to address emergency situations that pose a threat to public safety or natural resources. Section 3 is definitions. I should also have mentioned that we will have a brief opportunity at the end for clarifying questions. So if anything comes up, just jot a note in your margins and I'll attend to those clarifying questions after the presentation. Definitions. Right now we have in there agency lands, which essentially refers to the applicability section, and land management unit. So the important piece that I want to call out there is that sometimes management plans relate to a particular state forest or a particular state park. Sometimes those ownerships are immediately adjacent to one another. We'll have a state forest right next to a wildlife management area. It is logical through the ecological lens to think about that land unit as a unit. And so we will develop a management plan for a defined management unit. Section 4 is really where we start to get into the planning principles and framework that I mentioned before. So it touches on 4 types of plans, and I'll talk through each of these, as well as the amendment process. And for each of these types of plans, the rule discusses both the content of the plan and the process by which that plan will be developed. So the statewide plan, again, I just want to highlight that this is one of the proposed new additions to the management planning framework. This does not currently exist. We're not currently using this. So the purpose of the statewide plan, and this would be developed through a public planning process, which will be outlined later on in the presentation. The proposed contents of the statewide plan are as follows. It would include universal management actions, which are a list of actions that can be implemented on all agency lands without an approved long-range management plan, or LRMP. So these would be routine, ongoing, exigent management activities and maintenance. These are the basic activities that the public expects of a public land manager. Things like providing public access, addressing public safety concerns, and responding in a timely manner to natural resource concerns. We've provided examples of what we see as universal management actions in this rule, but we're proposing that the actual list would be hashed out and developed through the statewide planning process, which the public would have a role. So in other words, the public would have a role in developing this list. And you can see some of those examples on it's page 2 going into page 3 in your packet. The second major component of the statewide plan would be to develop land management classification standards and guidelines. So these would be management standards and guidelines for each of the land management classifications. I am going to go deeper into what those land management classifications are in a couple of slides. So these would establish what can occur or not and how within each of those land management classifications. And then the final major component that we're proposing would be included in the statewide plan would be management goals and standards for agency lands, which would be an outline of generally applicable management goals for agency lands. So within each of the natural resource topic areas that we consider within our plans, we would establish our management goals and standards for the full state lands portfolio. And I think this is, it's easier to describe this concept by using an example here. We essentially envision the statewide plan as a step-down plan between any state plan and a long-range management plan, which is unit-specific. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. If we're looking at recreation, we develop what is called the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. If we're looking at wildlife, we develop what's called the wildlife action plan. Those are plans that the departments develop for all lands in the state of Vermont, not just state lands. We're proposing that the statewide plan is the logical step between those plans that apply to all lands in the state of Vermont and our unit-specific long-range management plans. So the statewide plan would give us the opportunity to consider these goals and plans and ask ourselves with public input, how are we going to apply the state plan on Vermont state-owned lands and involve the public in that conversation? Long-range management plans. If you have engaged in our management planning process before, this is the type of planning process that likely you have engaged with. In terms of content, we're not proposing any major changes. The content would include the following. It would open with a description of the management unit that we're planning for. It's followed by a resource analysis. We often refer to these as our assessments. I'm now on page 3 to 4, and you can start to see what those assessments are that would be included. The list begins on page 3 and then it goes into page 4. So you can consider this the articulation of current condition for each of those resources listed. Then we get into that desired future state and planning for the future through what we call the management strategies and actions. There are two subcomponents of the communicating that desired future state that are always included and we propose would stay. The first is the delineation of what are called the land management classifications. That's an actual like land specific, geographically specific delineation on the ground of these classifications that we'll talk about momentarily, as well as the implementation schedule, which is the time frame within which we propose those actions will occur. And then in the appendices, we will include the public responsiveness summary, which is a summary of the public comment themes received and the agency's response to those comments. And these, again, what I have on the screen is an attempt to minimize the number of words. So just know there are more words in your packet that are more precise. And then in terms of process, there are some changes proposed to the process resulting from the addition of the statewide plan. And so I will call that out. If we were to proceed with adopting a statewide plan framework, long-range management plans would be developed on an as-needed basis where management actions other than universal management actions are proposed. So anything above and beyond that list of universal management actions that is developed through the statewide plan would need to be considered and noted in a long-range management plan. So in other words, not all lands would need to have a long-range management plan. Long-range management plans will generally be developed for a management period of 20 years. And rephrasing what I just said, long-range management plans are not required for any parcel or land management unit where only universal management actions will occur. So moving on to a third plan type, interim stewardship plans. These are not developed for all agency lands. These are developed to provide for certain uses and management activities that occur upon acquisition of land by ANR before a long-range management plan is developed. So associated with the land acquisition process when lands are coming into state ownership. Interim stewardship plans include uses and management activities that are necessary to address stewardship concerns, provide basic public access, and protect natural resources. And they're developed during the confidential land acquisition process, so for that reason are not subject to public input. And they're developed, this is really when required by the conservation partner or at the discretion of the district stewardship team. And then the last plan type are what we call annual stewardship plans. Annual stewardship plans identify those projects that are likely to occur in the next calendar year that have been approved in a long-range management plan. So you can essentially think of this as the list of activities that are upcoming based on all of the long-range management plans that exist in a given district. The annual stewardship plan is designed to ensure that all projects receive a thorough natural and cultural resource review and are consistent with approved management plans prior to implementation. So to elaborate on that a bit, all of those experts on the district stewardship team are involved with planning these activities and proposing these activities at the landscape scale through the development of the long-range management plan. Once we get to the annual stewardship plan, that level of detailed review steps down to an even finer scale. And so an example that I can offer there is the process by which we consider and develop trails on state land. Through the development of a long-range management plan, we would consider through the ecological review, the natural community mapping, the wildlife habitat assessment, the generally appropriate location for a new recreational corridor. When the time comes to move that forward, it will be listed in the annual stewardship plan. That's really the point where we're starting to get to the level of specificity of actually flagging something on the ground and screening, excuse me, for those finer scale features like individual plants. And that's where the ecologist or the botanist is actually out walking that specific corridor with those fine scale features in mind. And the annual stewardship plans we're proposing would also include those universal management activities. And then lastly, amendments. The section on amendments specifies for what plan types and when amendments would occur. So the rule proposes that we may amend an existing long-range management plan or the statewide plan to address the following circumstances: propose substantial changes in management goals or objectives, propose substantial change in land use or land classification, proposed new uses not addressed in the existing long-range management plan, or to add a new parcel of land. And amendments would be subject to the public engagement process. So now the land management classifications that I've been referring to throughout, these begin on page 4, and they continue. They're lengthy, and I'm going to hit on the high level categories, but it's also worth noting that there are subclasses here, and I hope you all will spend some time familiarizing yourself with these because we'd love your input on these. So the land management classifications, as I mentioned before, are assigned through the long-range management planning process. They are site-specific, geographic specific. It is a line that we are drawing. Lands without a long-range management plan will not have land management classifications. That's a big part of the process. There are 4 parent classifications, and I'm going to read the definitions of just the parent classes. So highly sensitive management area is an area with rare or outstanding biological, ecological, geological, scenic, cultural, or historic significance where protection of those resources is the primary consideration for management. Human activities and usage should not compromise the exceptional features identified. Special management. These are areas with special resources where protection and/or enhancement of those resources is an important consideration for management, but a wide range of uses and management activities, including intensive management, are acceptable when protection of the special resources may be achieved. However, timber harvesting, wildlife management, roads, and recreational activities should not compromise the special resources identified. General management areas, 3.0. Now on page 6. An area where the dominant uses are sustainable forest management, wildlife habitat management, concentrated trail networks, dispersed recreation, and other general uses. In these areas, minimizing conflict between activities is a primary management consideration. Resource areas within or adjacent to a general management area may require special consideration. This category includes all areas of land that do not meet the other classification categories. And then 4.0 is intensive management, an area that is easily accessible and characterized by a high level of human activity and high intensity development on or adjacent to state land. Aesthetics and safety are the primary management considerations in these areas. However, more sensitive resources that occur within these areas may require special consideration. So the easiest area to envision in that one is like a developed state park area. And then, as you saw, each of these have associated subclasses within each classification. So you'll see subclasses enumerated, and then the last subclass of each of these 4 parent classes is what we refer to as the district designation, which are areas not otherwise described above, but possessing other characteristics consistent with the description of the parent class. So I'm now going to move on from the contents of the plans and the plans type and talk about the public engagement process as proposed in the rule. This is the other big section of the rule and that other area that I really wanted to draw your attention to. So section 5.1, which is on page 8, talks about public scoping. We are proposing that public scoping shall be conducted prior to drafting a statewide plan or a long-range management plan to assess public opinion regarding uses and management of ANR lands. We lay out a time frame saying there will be a minimum of 2 weeks of notification of that public engagement process and 30 days to comment. And we say how that notification shall occur at a minimum. And what we're including is via press release and posting on the agency's website with other forms of public notice as determined appropriate. So that's scoping, that's before the plans are developed. And then section 5.2 talks about public comment and a public informational meeting. We say that the public shall have the opportunity to comment on a draft statewide plan, draft long-range management plan, or a proposed amendment to either of those two plan types. That there shall be at least one public informational meeting regarding a draft statewide plan, draft long-range management plan, or a proposed amendment. The time frame that we're proposing is the same. So notified and posted at least 2 weeks in advance of a public informational meeting and the public comment period, which will last at least 30 days. At a minimum, notification shall take the form of a press release and posting on the agency's website. And then we also note that a responsiveness summary shall be included in the final draft statewide plan, long-range management plan, or amendments, which will address the comments received by the agency. And then all public comments received during official scoping and public comment periods shall be maintained in accordance with the records retention procedures approved by the Secretary of State. So that wraps up the rapid run through of the rule. I want to just revisit my earlier overview of the major changes proposed. As I mentioned, one of the major changes proposed to our management planning framework is the addition of a statewide plan. We also are proposing adding 2 new land management classifications, and because I didn't articulate what those were before, I am going to talk through those right now. The first new subclass that we are proposing adding is a subclass of the highly sensitive management area. This we would call an ecological representation area, including associations of natural communities, geophysical settings, or other areas which make an outstanding contribution to meeting the ecological representation goals identified in Vermont conservation design. And the other subclass that we're proposing adding is subclass 2.12 as a subclass of the sensitive management category, which we propose calling an ecological enhancement area, which is an area that is designated by ANR in which active management in the near term may create or restore conditions that will qualify these lands as a highly sensitive management area in the long term. So remember that both of these recommendations are resulting from that work group that convened through the Act 59 or 30 by 30 conservation planning process with a specific task of considering how state lands will be used to increase ecological reserve areas, which is one of the categories of land identified in the 30 by 30 law. And the recommendation of the work group was these are the additional mechanisms that we need to be able to achieve that goal. So this is the opportunity to incorporate them. And then, as I mentioned, as we were going through, we've added that district designation subclass to all of the 4 parent subclasses, which I believe currently exists only for the highly sensitive management area subclass. So before we transition into public comments, and we'll do questions as well, I just want to highlight the different ways that you can submit a public comment. This public comment period opened on August 27th, and it will run until November 1st. You may attend one of the public meetings and provide a spoken comment. You can do that tonight. If you do not want to stand up and speak, you're welcome to submit your comments in writing. We have comment cards at the registration table. If you want to sort of walk away from this and process everything and read the rule again before you submit your comments, we have numerous ways for you to sort of take that pathway. You can submit your comments through our online comment form. You can send an email to ANR State Lands Planning at vermont.gov, or you can mail your comments to me at our central office in Montpelier. This information is all available on the front page of your packet. So before we transition to public comments, I'm happy to answer any clarifying questions. I know that was a really rapid run through. The goal of the clarifying questions is really to just do that, exactly that, clarify the contents of the draft rule or rulemaking process, if that's possible to do right now. This isn't necessarily intended to get into a discourse back and forth. We're really focused on those questions that are obviously clarifying in nature. And so with that, I'm happy to just check our time. 6:45, perfect. Yeah, so we have about 10 minutes for questions if anyone has any questions that they'd like, and if not, we'll transition to public comment. Yes, Mark.
Thank you. Annual stewardship plans. Well, I understand why the interim stewardship plans are not available for public comment, but the annual stewardship plans, will they be available for public comment? Because that wasn't clear.
We're not proposing that because the actions listed on the annual stewardship plans have been considered through the long-range management planning process, which is a public engagement process.
Okay. And my last question is, we're able to submit some written comments tonight, but 90 seconds doesn't allow us to submit it.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Written comments will really still be counted even though we spoke tonight. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you for clarifying. So yes, the comment period tonight will extend it because there are not too many people here tonight. So each commenter can have 2 minutes, but you're absolutely right. You can submit written comments as well if you'd like to make lengthier comments, and we'll see a familiar name and merge those together. Yeah, Elizabeth?
Thank you. I might have missed this as we described in the rule, and please correct me if my interpretation is incorrect, but it seems like the LRMP will apply if more actions than universal management actions need to be taken on the land. What is the process of determining if further actions beyond the universal management actions need to be taken place? Is that somewhere in the rule?
That's not listed in the rule.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes.
Gibson, Recruiter. Would you please restate what you said about early on about contiguous non-state-owned land relation to the management planning process?
Yeah, I think, sure. I think it, yeah, I think I got it. So I think that was in the slide where I was talking about the goals of management planning. And I said one of the goals of the management planning process is to consider the landscape scale natural resource considerations. And so that is really the opportunity for us to think about how state lands are situated within other lands that may not be state owned. And so if I could use Vermont conservation design as an example, we can think about how a particular state land management unit fits within a larger forest block, and therefore what opportunity that individual state land unit provides. So it's our landscape scale, is our chance to step back and think about the ecological context for those state lands.
And I just want to go question. Clarity does not mean, and I want to hear a suggestion that this is some better to manage private lands, the state lands. But is there any inference that I could make or make as to not just resources that might be on contiguous land in terms of the management of the similar resources on state lands, but the forestry practices on contiguous lands that might be relevant to decisions that are made with respect to state land?
I'm not sure I'm completely following, but I think what I'll just sort of wrap up with there is just acknowledging that there are numerous conservation planning tools that exist they're not developed for state lands only, they're developed for lands. And so that's the opportunity to think about how state lands fit within the larger context. Yeah. Yeah.
You extended the discretion of the secretary. I couldn't see any place in there where.
Do you have a question? That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering why that is. Why there's only, discretion of the Secretary of State. You're modifying that one way to bring in, that's why there isn't any, little public.
That's what we're proposing. And so if you want to suggest a modification, please do submit it as a comment. Yeah.
Can I just come in there?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm Oliver Pearson. I'm the Director of Forest and Policy Planning at FPR. Just to clarify that if there's a plan amendment, there is a public comment period
Thank
for a plan amendment. What you're talking about, an extension of the plan, is simply extending the longevity of the plan, but all the activities are carried over from the existing plan. So an extension will not include new activities.
Yeah.
And that is why we have not contemplated public comment around simply plan extension.
Thanks, Oliver. That was an important clarification. Yes, in the back.
So just following up on that, please, the activities under the long range management plan may not change, if they consistent beyond the 20-year quote unquote lifespan. But the context, the overall socio-environmental economic context, may change. Correct?
I think so. I'm not sure I totally understand, but I'm happy to speak to you about it afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I can, I have a question.
Yes, question.
This is a draft process.
Yes. I'm sorry. Did you come in a little bit late?
I did. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I opened by just indicating that, there's the rulemaking process, which is a formal process. And we can look through this together if you'd like afterwards. We are currently in, pre-rulemaking public engagement. So this is not the formal rulemaking process yet. We're conducting a round of public engagement to get feedback before we decide what to file in that formal rulemaking process. So this is an optional undertaking that we're in right now.
Okay, I thank you. So the draft rulemaking process will lead to the final rulemaking proposal, which involves some amount of public engagement. And that goes to the final, that ends with the legislature. Is that correct?
Yeah, why don't you and I touch base afterwards and I can run through those slides with you that I opened with. We also have recorded this, so.
Okay,
Okay, thanks. Why don't we transition unless there are any final clarifying? Yeah,
Right. Couple of questions are all pretty short. Under the long range and development, you have various classifications. Slide up there with the classification of the management, I believe. This says special management,
oh, thank you.
the typo.
Yes, on the fifth. Yeah, thanks.
To the point about long range management, plan lasting 20 years or extended, they can be amended, which brings a public comment period, but to clarify, it seems that the amendment is brought in by ANR itself.
That's correct.
Public cannot suggest that.
Yes. Thank you.
And, that's what that. Thank you.
Just want to clarify and make sure that,
Okay.
I'm sorry, it actually doesn't specify that in the rule. And so if that's something that should be specified, that's worth submitting a comment about. Yeah.
Did have one question. Mentioned at the beginning that there are long-range management plans in place for only about a third of state and properties. Is it safe to assume that the other 2/3 have at least an interim management plan in place?
I wouldn't
No.
make assumptions. No, I wouldn't feel comfortable making assumptions or statements about the current status.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big shortfall. That's why we're here.
On the spot, I wouldn't feel comfortable arriving at. That was the person. Yeah. Yes. Oh, sorry, I can read.
Statute policy review of requirements, and that's the question of judgment of the outcome. So that does not mean that decided. That's not going to influence the law or is.
I would like to have an opportunity to look at that before I answer, so I'm happy to touch base with you afterwards. I don't want to like make my own interpretations in the moment, and at least that's not an answer that I'm ready to provide at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, other also has to do is that ANR will continue to develop and update these policies, et cetera. So that also, public comment.
Not necessarily.
Yes. In section 4, ANR will continue to develop and update speakers policy and guidelines relevant to the latest management activities. The procedures, policies, and guidelines will be intelligence taken indexed, made publicly available. But, and the question was, are we also to have? That's what it's right?
The answer is not no, it's not necessarily. It's just, I'm just trying to call out that there's not a committing statement one way or the other.
It's not a legal requirement to take comment on those procedures. Whereas we're required to take comment when we're developing the rules through the Administrative Procedures Act. Formal rulemaking process, as an example, something, there's a dichotomy there that we're trying to highlight. Procedures.
This draft.
Exactly, there's no committing statement in this draft. Yes. Did you have a question, sir?
Yes, you mentioned earlier that we need to have discipline, that's like a discussion. Did ANR ever consider having the head of the three agencies have discipline with a general public?
I don't really know how to answer that question. I'm the person who's been leading on this initiative. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we are going to switch to public comment. I am going to give myself a little break and turn it over to Oliver Pearson, our Director of Forests. And he will walk us through the comment portion. So as I mentioned, we had, oh, I'm sorry, Oliver, I have to just walk through the comment slides. As I mentioned, because it's a relatively small group tonight, we have time for us to go. We'll extend the comment period to 2 minutes. And I just want to walk through the format for providing that public comment. So you all know how to sign up. We'll extend that to 2 minutes. You are, of course, welcome to submit more extensive written comments as well. Our goal is to hear from you. So we're going to sit down and listen to your thoughts. And then this meeting is being recorded. I mentioned that and will be posted on our website after the fact. So just want everyone to be aware. We will post all comments received on our website after the comment period closes. That includes both these recordings of the public meetings as well as any written comments that we receive. And if our comments don't take us to 8 p.m., we'll wrap up early. We'll still be here for questions afterwards. So again, I thought that if you're trying to figure out where or how do you want to engage with the public comment opportunity, these are two areas that will be especially helpful, but of course, comments are welcome on any and all aspects of the rule. Does the draft rule provide the public comment opportunities that you desire? If not, what would you propose changing? Do the land management classifications match the desired conditions you'd like to see on Vermont state lands? And then our expectations for public comment assume good intentions. We're all here because we care deeply about Vermont state lands. Our hope is that you can offer us really tangible, constructive feedback. So if there's something that you disagree with and you have a suggestion for what could be changed, we would really benefit from hearing that. We ask for your respect as you deliver those comments and to honor the requested time limits. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Oliver Pearson, our Director of Forests, and he'll take us through the next phase. I'll also just note that we have Niels Reinhardt sitting right in the front here, and he has little sheets that will show you when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is up. So just pay attention to him, and we will try not to interrupt you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Niels, could you turn that off?
Great. So I'll call up the first commenter in a second. For the folks that signed up, we just did a quick random ordering. So it's a randomized number. You're not coming up in any particular order, but we really appreciate those of you that took the time to come and speak, give us your feedback on the draft rule. I would say part of assuming good intentions is, as Hannah said, this is pre-rulemaking. We have a draft rule. Want your feedback and input on it. When we do that first filing to the the Administrative Committee on Administrative Rulemaking, ICAR, Interagency Committee, there is the possibility that the comments that you make tonight will be considered, and they will be considered. And there's the possibility that the feedback we get from the public will be incorporated into that rule. So we really want to hear what you have to say, and you have the opportunity to influence our rulemaking with your input either tonight or what's written. So I think I'd also add there are multiple bites at the apple. As Hannah mentioned, we will have after the ICAR meeting, Interagency Committee on Administrative Rulemaking, we'll go back out for a formal public hearing, take comment at that point, and then when we do that third step, go to see the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rulemaking. They will ask us, did you hold public comments? We'll say yes, and they'll ask us, what changes have you made, if any, based on those comments? And we will have to respond to that. So there are, I think a lot of this is about opportunities for public input. There are multiple opportunities, and tonight is just the start of that process. So having said that, the first commenter is Rich. You're randomly selected to be our first speaker, so come on up. Floor is yours.
Number one, wow. YMCV, WC de Sal, Dai Montasagak, Talis Upaki, Niano, El Nuvo Manaki. My name's Rich. I'm from down the rivers in Brattleboro, that you know today, traditionally known as Montastagok. I am current chair of the Vermont Commission on Native American Affairs, citizen of Belnu Beneki Band, and I wear other hats. But I'm here with a simple proposition, a suggestion. I take my cue from the place where we are today because place matters completely. Relationship to place matters completely. And the way we talk about it, the words we use, thus the rulemaking. We are in Jackson Gore. Immediately outside of this place, there is a paleo-archaeological site. it tells us that people have been here in this landscape interacting with for 11,000 years. Long time. They, their relatives, and their descendants have been in this place in relationship with it for 11,000 years. That's called sustainability. That's called a good way to be. I want to point out that Indigenous perspectives have never had a place in the rules and policies and the laws of this state. They should. They work. I want to suggest that Indigenous perspectives, consultation, and inclusion be included in the rulemaking, in the management plan creation that happens in this state. I don't know exactly what the mechanism is going to be. Somebody on a board, on a council needs to be there. Mandatory. Believe me. Thank you.
If that's something else. Thank you. Second speaker, I hope I get the pronunciation right, is Amore Richards. Apologize if I got that right or got that incorrect. Thank you. We'll skip to the third person. So we just learned that Amore stepped out, so we're going to go to Mr. Jonathan Gibson. Maybe what I'll do is say following Mr. Gibson is Edward Christopher Weatherby.
Jonathan Gibson from Shrewsbury. A little bit of history for those of you who don't know it, perhaps helpful for those who don't know it. Some of you will know it. When Madeline, yes, I can. Let me start over. Oh, I need a mic.
There you go.
A little history. Some of you will know it. May be useful for those of you who don't. When Madeline Kunin was governor, her commissioner of Forest, Parks, and Recreation was the wonderful Molly Beatty. She had the commitment to good forestry and to responsive government. She initiated a planning process, which was very significant. Since that time, the department has continued and built on a planning process. It is sort of what we have today is sort of cobbled together. There was no statutory basis per se for the planning process under Governor Kunin. There's no statutory basis for the process today. This rulemaking is an attempt to move the needle forward, I think, and I appreciate very much the department's good work and the conscientious attendance here this evening. The rule does not really enhance the existing public participation system as far as I can tell. There is the addition of the statewide plan. There are the two categories that make reference to the Act 59, but really I think it reinforces in some ways the existing structure. There is no opportunity for input at many points along the way that should be provided in this proposed rule. Timber sales, for example, the amendments, etc. I believe that you need to submit something in writing, but I believe you need to go through this process, put out a new draft. It's worthwhile. We've taken 20 years to get to this point before you go to LCAR and put in more public participation opportunities. It's simply inadequate now for the decision making by our public officials, as well-meaning and as conscientious as you all are.
So coming up is Mr. Edward Christopher Weatherby, and then after that, Amore Richards will be the fourth speaker. Sir.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work that's been done to start this ball rolling. I am here to say that I think all the related projects that the ANR is involved in is really great. I am here to suggest that we stop all logging on the state and federal public lands. I do want to say that a lot of my entire life has been associated with the wood industry. My grandfather had a farm and a sawmill in Tinmouth. My father was driving a pulp truck when he was 12. I got a degree in forestry from UMaine-Orono in 1980. I worked in manufacturing for 25 years in the wood industry. I've been responsible for consuming a lot of logs. But I feel that it's important to consider leaving the large concentrations of forest. I think it's fine to maintain all the related things in the state, but that's what I feel like, and I appreciate the chance to contribute more to growing the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weatherby. More, come on up, and then it's Mr. Mark Nelson following.
Hello, I'm Amor Richards. I live and go to Vermont Law School in South Royalton, Vermont. I represent Standing Trees as a student attorney in the Environmental Advocacy Clinic at Vermont Law and Graduate School. However, today I am commenting in my own name. My comment is simple. Let's strengthen the public land through public participation. I acknowledge the agency's commitment to the public, and I appreciate this meeting and the one that's happening later this week in Hardwick. I also commend the agency for this rulemaking and for inviting the public into this process at a crucial early stage. My ask for the agency is to follow through on its commitment to the public and to keep inviting public participation early and often as it proceeds with long-term planning and related site-specific actions. More specifically, for myself and for other interested Vermonters, I urge the agency to provide in this rule for an advance notice and opportunity to comment on changes for long-term plans and for subsequent site-specific actions, and such decisions of precisely where and how to allow commercial logging. Thank you, and I look forward to writing more and further comments.
Thank you, Amor. As I said, it's Mark Nelson coming up now, followed by Cheryl Joy Lipton.
My name is Mark Nelson. I live in Ripton. I am the board chair for Standing Trees, but my comments tonight are my individual comments. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity to provide comments on this proposed rulemaking. These are just a few of my comments that will be submitted in writing. First of all, this rule in all planning is defined in Section 4 of this rule should require consideration of all current state policies and scientific and economic data pertaining to the lost storage and foregone sequestration of carbon and the effects on greenhouse gas emissions. It should address water quality, biodiversity, endangered species protection, habitat fragmentation, flood protection, and the public trust. Some of these are included in the current draft, but not all. Secondly, cumulative impact analysis should be included in all planning, not just on a project by project look. Under this section for highly sensitive subclasses, I would suggest that the sensitive wildlife habitat should include bat hibernacula and bat maternity roost trees as opposed to just bat caves. And then another subclass should be added for mature and old growth areas. A written and applying to public comment and public information meetings, Instead of just providing a summary of all public comments, it would be good to get a written response specific to each public comment, very similar to what we get on federal actions. And then the last two things for today is under the long-range management plan content for resource assessment, we should include water health and carbon assessment on the areas impacted and a carbon assessment of the activities involved in those in the list of resource analysis. And then finally for today, just to point out, I found a typo for you. Section 4.2.1 refers to section 4.1.3. There is no section 4.1.3. It should be 4.2.3. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the voluntary editing. You can send us your bill later. Let's see, Cheryl Joy Lipton, please, and followed by Michael Bald.
Thanks, and I'm going to apologize because it's a little difficult to read with it being so dark. Can you hear me now? Okay. So Cheryl Joy Lipton, I live in Chester, just only 20 minutes away from here. So first of all, I think that there should be public input at all steps in the process, in all of the processes. It seems like there's definitely room for improvement with public input, and rather than just making information available to the public, take input and then use that appropriately. It's easy to have a listserv to be able to give information to people who sign up for it of all planned work on state lands. Also, especially in this time of great change, the list of particular universal management actions seems to be much too large. There should be only a small amount of things that are universal management actions, only things to keep, for safety and things like that. I think there should be public input on all management plans or management actions. With regard to the long-range management plan, 20 years is definitely too long, especially now when there are big changes in biodiversity and climate impacts. So the federal lands have a 15-year, they're supposed to be 15-year updates. And I think that that's too long as well, especially during these times. And there's new science coming up all the time, much that is not even paid attention to unless we make a rule to pay attention to it. So a few things that is it over? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll do the rest online. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'd like to invite up Michael Bald, followed by Peter McCausland. Great. I just want to let this gentleman know he's next.
Sure. Do you put up time things like 30 seconds?
Yeah, he can go.
Okay,
Come on up, sir. So this is Peter McCausland, correct?
Yes,
Thank you,
Peter
sir.
McCausland, Burlington, Vermont individual. 50 years ago, Vermont was a pioneer and passed the bottle bill. So I hope the state does so to end logging on the state lands. There's sufficient private forests to supply the lumber companies in the state. There's a 4-page document which I printed up. It's called Role of the Public from ANR. Page 2, quote, the purpose of public involvement is not to institute majority rule management of public land, ... They may include suggestions which are compatible. That's undemocratic. ANR needs to update a document that's 5 years old. What else do I want to say? Yes, section 2 of the section 2, number C, quote, emergency situations that pose a threat to public safety.
There's an emergency right now. I don't have confidence in the NRA enacting that if this rule comes into effect. So we need people like everyone's here and me. I'm very nervous. This is unusual for me to speak in public. To have people do something similar to the bottle bill. How's my time? Thank you. I took a great hike on Alice State Park. It's wonderful. ANR does a lot of good things. I don't want to use the word beholden, but it's unfortunate when loggers and timber people lose their jobs. It's unfortunate. I get it. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Peter. Michael, and then our final speaker is Elizabeth Hine.
Thank you, Michael Bald, Royalton. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I'll try to be constructive. That's my intention. I get concerned when I hear language about minimum requirements. Minimum for public outreach is such and such. I'm not impressed with minimums. Show me that you care to get input and go for maximum. Why not? What does it hurt? That said, I know that funding is what drives agencies, whether it's state or federal. Funding is always the bottleneck through which our actions have to pass. So therefore, I get concerned when I hear about plans that have a theoretical or a written expiration date. I don't know the expiration on the Vermont conservation design, but these things need to have expiration dates. The federal government tends often to just run right past those and just say, well, we don't have the funding to go through the amendment process or the update process. Well, sorry about that, but that's your obligation. Public engagement is an obligation, keeping plans current in the evolving socioeconomic, ecological world that we live in. We are now in the new normal. I'm not going to tell you what that is, but I suspect I have some ideas on it. And I see a lot of agency action that's driven by the past normals. That's a problem. I'm concerned about special interests having access to some of this planning that I don't have access to. I could make something up, get a whole bunch of money behind me and come in and get involved in the planning process where other people cannot. That's a problem. Final concern is layering of plans that become hardened, concreted into place over time, and then they're inviolable. You can't change these things when there's 4 layers of planning that all reinforce one another, and then nothing can be changed because we don't have the money to go through the amendment process. I've been to the legislature before and the whole action, administrative rule planning, it's a little bit of a mess. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and we'll conclude with Elizabeth.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Hine. I live in South Royalton, Vermont, and like Amor, I am currently a student at Vermont Law and Graduate School. I do represent standing trees in my work, but I'm here in my personal capacity. I'd like to start off by thanking you for holding this public comment meeting, as it is important to me that I, along with other Vermonters, have the opportunity to provide input on public land management in Vermont. On that note, I'm asking you to amend the draft rule today in a way that presents and emphasizes the importance of public input. First, the state should offer a virtual asynchronous public meeting option to make these public comment meetings more accessible to the general public. In addition, the draft rule mandates that ANR issue press releases and posting on its website. I echo Cheryl's point that she mentioned earlier that this minimum requirement should be raised, potentially through a listserv or something where people can sign up and receive emails. I would also suggest that the comment period should be lengthened from 30 days to potentially 60 to give, again, more opportunity for the public to provide comments. And then finally, my interpretation of the rule is that it minimizes public input in its very format by sequestering the public responsiveness survey to the appendix of the final RMP
one way to emphasize the importance of public input would be to potentially move the position of, or the location of the public responsiveness summary to the beginning. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Once again, thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. It's great to see the interest and commitment and ideas that you've shared with us. As one of our speakers mentioned, there's another public meeting. I believe it's on Thursday night this week up in Hardwick, trying to get southern and northern half of the states represented. We have a timeline for then completing the pre-rulemaking process, developing a, let's call it final draft rule, and then beginning the 4 filings that Hannah mentioned in her presentation. The timeline will take us through to the end of this year and into next year, most likely. We don't have a draft date that we're comfortable sharing for getting it to the beginning of that first filing. It'll depend on the type of comments we get from you all once the public comment period is complete and how long it takes us to synthesize those comments, develop our final draft, and begin the formal rulemaking process thereafter. So stay tuned to the website that lists information about the rulemaking process. Hopefully you've been able to find that website because that's perhaps how you learned about this meeting this evening. And we'll continue to update that website with information about next steps in the process. So once again, thanks to my colleagues from Agency of Natural Resources for being here tonight. And thanks to everyone for coming. Have a great evening. Travel safe.